the qualifier stage of our World Cup. How are you doing, Hayden?
Oh, I'm so excited to get into these matches today. Yeah, very, very excited. Wonderful. We've got a whole store of matches in store today and really excited about them.
Yep, and I forgot to mention to the viewers out there, Bomdia, that's how you pronounce Bomdia in Portuguese. And that's something that's sort of a running joke in our community. And today, in this week 2 of games, like week 1 just ended and there were so many like exciting stories. There were like actually 2 matches that went 8-0, which was extremely surprising. And it took a lot of people aback. And I'm very excited to see what this week brings. Because this week, it's actually the second out of the third week of games, and teams are really, countries are really going to strive hard to get as many points as possible, as many wins to make it through to the group stage.
Absolutely. Every week matters so much in this format, and very excited to see sort of as we begin with the first couple of matches to open up this particular week. I'm very excited to see how that goes.
Yep. So today's matches, we will have a lot of countries that, some countries that we featured last week, but we're trying our best to feature as many as possible. So first off, we have Uruguay versus Guatemala, and that's Juan Castillos versus Pablo Aldana. And then we have Brian Pérez versus Kevonne Boreland, David Degerman from Sweden versus Andres Quintero, Oliver Escalin versus Ryan Pareja from the Philippines. So very exciting matchups, and some players, some new faces and some old faces that you guys would be familiar with.
Yeah, a whole wide range of countries we're going to be going with here. Excited to see that first match with Juan and Pablo we'll be showing shortly. And yeah, definitely some veteran players like Oliver Escalin had a brilliant performance this year at the EU International Championships. Very close at just barely getting second place. I'm very excited for that one, especially, but really all of these games are going to be quite a treat.
Yeah, personally, I met Oliver. He's such a cool guy, and like when I went to NAIC, I really had a lot of fun meeting a lot of people and talking about this like environment, the community in VGC. It's just very nice of us to be able to bring you guys all these games from the comfort of our homes all the way to your homes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick reminder to everyone that if you're interested in this stream or you want to hear more, please follow Victory Road on all of the various social channels. We've got Twitter. You can watch these matches as well on YouTube. You can subscribe to Twitch so you can see these streams live, and you can join the Discord for Victory Road. All this information about the World Cup is also available at worldcupvgc.com.
Yep, so worldcupvgc.com is the website that all of us are going to keep our eyes on. All the players are going there every day, probably to do a bit of scouting, if like, especially when the games from week 1 have already ended and all the teams have been published up on the website, and you should be able to like check out the teams that your opponents used last week and maybe do a little bit of homework for this week. So here we are with our very first matchup, Uruguay versus Guatemala. And from the website, we can see that 3 matches are already played, and Uruguay is actually up 2-1 against Guatemala. Guatemala kind of being the team that is more of the fan favorite, that because they did pretty well last year, qualifying into the group stages.
Yeah, Uruguay off to a very strong start here, but definitely still any side could definitely take this set. Going to really matter who wins between Juan and Pablo for who's maybe going up 3-1 or who's tying it off at 2-2.
Yeah, and then lots of interesting teams here. We actually see a team with Shedinja and Aerodactyl, and a little bit of a spoiler up ahead. I think Uruguay is kind of bringing the sauce here, although it's like a stable Zacian and Kyogre core, they seem to be mixing it up pretty well, and this is so impressive to see Ente actually winning a game for Uruguay.
Yeah, that's quite an impressive team. And I think if you're looking on the other side as Guatemala and seeing all these extraordinary Pokemon choices, that makes it really hard to be able to prepare for each individual match. Like there could be anything coming from one side. It seems like this team is really creative, and I think that's a really strong advantage in these formats where you get to see some of the teams that each side is using across weeks, but maybe you still don't have a good sense of what to prepare for.
Yeah, it's also interesting to see that like Juan Manuel, the player on the top, use a Yveltal team to overcome a Xerneas team. Yeah, so I'm very excited to see what we have for this match between Pablo Aldana versus Juan Castillos.
Yeah, so let's jump right into the players. Pablo, a few wonderful finishes in the LATAM circuit, and very excited to sort of jump in and do some games here. Those are all champion top 4 finalists, wonderful accomplishments. Excited to see what Pablo has today.
So from Juan's side, Uruguay, he did not like provide any accomplishments, but that does not like hold him back, right? Like he can come with good surprises, or he can be pretty hard to scout in some sense, and that should be that could be an advantage coming out from Uruguay. And notably, actually, these two players did represent their countries last year in the 2021 World Cup, and they did pretty well. So trying to outdo themselves from last time and bring their country to further heights this time.
Absolutely. And we mentioned that Juan could be bringing all kinds of things that might be hard to prepare for. And indeed, we have Talonflame, Umbreon, as well as the more standard Zacian, Dialga, Rillaboom, and Landorus from his side, versus Pablo's Kyogre and Zacian with Incineroar, Landorus, Tornadus, Kartana, sort of that relatively standard Tailwind Kyogre core that we've seen do really well at like the Japanese National Championships and the North American International Championships just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so the one from North America, NAIC, would be Gabriel Agati's team from Brazil, and he managed to climb all the way through both day 1 and day 2 and achieve 2nd place. So this is a team that is no stranger to us. Having like both the flying type mons paired up with the Zacian and the Kyogre is a very, very strong team composition. And from Juan's side, it's so interesting to see Zacian and Dialga. Zacian and Dialga. We saw Marcus Stetter use a Zacian Dialga team last week, but that had a Sableye and a Ditto. But this time we are seeing something special with this double steel core with the Talonflame and the Umbreon. Umbreon being a Pokemon that we don't see very often, but could be very bulky and could help to win some games.
Yeah, so many steel types for this set, and we're going to jump straight in with Landorus and Incineroar from the top, going against Umbreon. We get to see it, and that Dialga. So lots of Intimidate on the field, but a lot of defensive Pokemon on the other side to face those down. Oh, slight technical difficulty. We'll be back in just a second.
Yeah, so we actually see double Intimidate coming out, and then like double checking that the Umbreon's ability activates, so that's inner focus Umbreon, so it cannot get faked out. Therefore, it should be able to help disrupt the opponent, sometimes with Yawn, sometimes with Snarl, but it doesn't really matter here. But I think on Juan's side, it could be logical to Dynamax the Dialga on turn 1, or if you are afraid of a parting shot or an attack coming out from the Landorus, then you could probably switch it out and try and reposition here.
Yeah, I think that Landorus especially has so much pressure from Pablo's side of the field, and we're going to see the Dialga swap out in response to that, sending out a Rillaboom, going to set that grassy terrain, be able to potentially take any max Quake if the Landorus really commits to taking down the Dialga. We're going to see Rillaboom also getting in without Intimidate pressure on it. And that Landorus is going to Dynamax, presumably. Unless it's the Incineroar, potentially. And so potentially really nice to get that Rillaboom in to take Max Quake. We'll see what the Landorus decided to go for, though. Lots of options there.
And I think it doesn't really like make sense for a Landorus to go for an Airstream, perhaps, into the Dialga. So this could be a safe switch, but the Airstream actually goes into the Umbreon, doing a very sizable chunk. But Umbreon, being very bulky, should be able to shrug it off, and giving the Incineroar an Airstream boost, which could be useful in the form of a parting shot that actually goes into the Rillaboom.
Yes, the parting shot going off before the Umbreon. We aren't sure if that normally would have happened. That Rillaboom lowering its attack a little, got in without the Intimidate, but still not going to be able to do max damage. And something's going to come in, but this Umbreon, we still haven't seen what it's going to do yet, and it might have a lot it could do to disrupt whatever comes in or this Landorus.
Yeah, so going for a Yawn would make a lot of sense because that could sort of put Landorus on a timer, and we also don't really know like Landorus's items, so there could be a plan from Pablo going straight for the Dynamax on turn 1.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if my Spanish is right, I think that's Yawn.
I think so, yeah. So this Landorus definitely set up to be going to sleep next turn unless it has a particular item that might help it out. But we're going to see the Zacian coming in, so that there's a lot. There's maybe the Landorus will go to sleep eventually, but there's a lot of pressure this turn still on what might happen.
Yeah, and I think Juan is kind of playing a little bit passive, but it does make sense because he's kind of trying to stall out the Dynamax since we already see Landorus Dynamax, and over here with the fake out pressure from his Rillaboom, Rillaboom could go for a fake out and a Yawn into the Zacian slot.
And we're going to see the Landorus just going out immediately, does not want to fall asleep, and that's Dynamax gone for Pablo. Incineroar coming in, going to lower the attack stat on that Rillaboom, and the Zacian could potentially do something, but the Rillaboom does have fake out pressure, so we'll have to see how that plays out. Zacian just going to protect to make sure it stays safe.
Yeah, so the board state kind of seems like pretty even right now, and Juan's plan seems to be working well in terms of stalling the game out and making sure he has a good chance to Dynamax, presumably the Dialga in the back, right? And this fake out and Yawn does make sense into the Zacian, however Pablo reads it and cleverly protects the Zacian, and this time with the smart switch of a Dynamax Landorus into an Incineroar, it does provide fake out pressure in this turn and probably a lot of damage into the Rillaboom slot if the Rillaboom does not have Protect.
Yeah, we've seen this sort of style of play from Umbreon in the past that it's just amazing at slowing down the opposing side of the field. Very, very impressive play from Juan. And yeah, we're going to see a turn play out, that Umbreon taking a play rough, going to just be gone now. It did its job, but it's gone from the field. And then we're going to see Rillaboom go for a U-turn, pivot out of that Incineroar, does not want to take a Flare Blitz, does not like being at -1 attack. We're going to see what comes in now. But a really big pivot here. Juan just lost a Pokemon.
Yeah, I'm interested to see like what the plan is ultimately, right? Because Zacian's play rough, it might not be pretty common. So a play rough into the Umbreon might not be a move that Juan expected, and in some sense, Juan might not want to switch in probably the Dialga to take probably a Sacred Sword coming from the Zacian. So he was content to let the Umbreon go down there to allow Rillaboom to switch out and come back with fake out pressure again. So we shall see how the turns play out to see if this plan actually plays out, because I think the Umbreon maybe it did its job in stopping the Landorus from going for 3 full max moves with that Yawn, and we still want like curious to see whether this sacrifice actually pays off, right?
Yeah, so Rillaboom coming back in, pressuring that Zacian. Zacian goes out to a Landorus, and Dialga is going to be able to max. We're going to see if Juan's gamble with using Umbreon earlier and then losing it is going to pay off right here. We're going to see how much damage this Dialga can do. Set up in a great position to be able to damage these two Pokemon. Not sure if it'll be able to handle that Zacian in the back, though. Now there's a potential switch into a lot of the moves Dialga might want to use.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And over here, Rillaboom goes for the fake out into the Landorus. It makes sense. Doesn't want the Landorus to do a lot of damage. And this should be a max worm win into the Incineroar, which is a very neutral move, but it's a bit curious, like why they went for a dragon move instead of a ground move into the Incineroar. But with that life orb on the Dialga is able to take out the Incineroar, and at the same time we do reveal the white herb, if I'm not wrong, on the Landorus. So we kind of know its item. It's not the Lumberry, which is why it could be a logical move for it to switch out in the middle of a Yawn just now.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of information for one there on the white herb, knowing that you can get the Wormwind KO on Incineroar. We still don't know if it has a berry that could protect it from a ground move or not. I guess that's something Juan will have to figure out later. And we see the Kyogre come in, which ordinarily a very strong pick, but not too happy probably staring down this Rillaboom and this Dialga.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting situation with both players keeping their Zacians in the bag. We all know that a Zacian endgame is something that you always want to strive for, right? So over here, like protecting your Zacian and still not knowing which Zacian is faster, but like making sure that the Zacian is always in the end, trying to take care of opposing Landorus or the opposing Dialga that's Dynamax. And this is a very obvious move coming out from the Kyogre going for the protect to protect itself from the Rillaboom, and it's a very smart switch into the Zacian. But look at this Max Steel Spike, it actually does so much damage into the Zacian because it's neutral.
Yeah, that's a huge amount. It looks like the Zacian just barely hung on though, and all you need is a little hit points. But quite a tough situation now. The Rillaboom could maybe just pick that off with a Grassy Glide. Everything has a defense boost on one side of the field. Just a wonderful catching of that Zacian on the switch.
Just now, like when we were chatting earlier, Hayden made a joke about the Zacian surviving on 1 HP. It's like a focused Zacian. Yeah, a focused Zacian. And here we do see it, like impressive bulk coming out from the Zacian, which is no surprise. And at the same time, we do see the grassy terrain dissolve. So with that defense boost, I'm curious to see whether the Rillaboom can survive the onslaught of Zacian and Kyogre, and should be able to like help do damage into the Kyogre slot.
Rillaboom recognizing the grassy terrain gone, just gonna have to pivot out into the Zacian, hope maybe the Zacian can survive. So that's gonna come in, but that means that the two restricteds on Pablo's side have free reign to do whatever they would like this turn. They'll have to take an attack from Dialga. They can do a lot in return. And we're gonna see the Behemoth Blade coming out. Onto either side, it'll do so much damage. It's catching the Zacian on the switch. Zacian does survive though, so that's a lot of position for one. But looks like Origin Pulse coming out, or maybe Water Spout, taking out Zacian and bringing Dialga low. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Pablo kind of understands that both Pokemon are faster with the absence of the grassy terrain. Just goes for as much damage as possible. We apologize that both of us don't really know Spanish that much, so we're not sure whether there was a Water Spout or an Origin Pulse, but that sure is a lot of damage and was able to actually catch the Zacian on the switch in. But in return, the Dialga actually manages to send the finishing blow onto the Zacian, and that removes the Zacian out of the picture, and we actually end up with a 2v2 situation on the field here.
Yeah, a whole lot going on here. The Rillaboom does come in and has now a permanent attack drop from that Landorus, but it does have Fake Out Pressure to support the Dialga. The Dialga has a couple of defense boosts that might help it versus the Landorus. Grassy terrain's up, so Earthquake will do less damage, but that Kyogre might still be able to do a fair bit with the Rillaboom being lowered attack.
Yep, so wow, interesting like selection of moves, because I would say like on this turn the Kyogre is very likely to protect, and the Rillaboom actually, like, Juan actually locked in the Grassy Glide onto the Kyogre slot, and Dialga is actually really low in HP. Although it got all its boost up, I think Pablo has been working very hard to dish out as much damage as possible. It's quite curious to see that the Zacian did not like go for a fighting move into the Dialga. Here comes a Grassy Glide, and it actually does not take out the Kyogre. And wow, what an interesting move coming out from the Landorus Sword Stance that could be useful in future turns.
Ice Beam coming out into the Dialga, doesn't get the KO though, so Dialga gets to go for a Roar of Time, I think, into the Landorus. That's probably just going to be a complete knockout, so that all those attack boosts on Landorus gone. Dialga going to faint to the Life Orb recoil though, but an endgame of Rillaboom versus Kyogre, Rillaboom probably seems pretty happy about that.
Yeah, interesting like move choices, and it actually pays off for Juan. And actually like trying his best to pin the Kyogre with the Grassy Glide, and that really worked well. And that's very impressive of the Dialga to survive the Ice Beam curiously and go for like the amazing animation of Raw of Time and actually goes down to the Life Orb. And over here, with plenty of grassy terrain turns left, I believe Juan actually manages to get this game in the bag with that Rillaboom.
Yeah, sort of a calm end to the set as we watch the Kyogre try to go for a Protect, but that doesn't work, and Grassy Glide's going to finish up that KO. Such a nail-biter ending of the set, though. It felt like Juan had a lot of momentum, but it all came down to that one Ice Beam on the Dialga. Like, if that had KO'd, the set would have been over. If the Landorus had gone for a different attack, the set might have been over. So both sides probably thinking about, what can I do to adjust here so that it's not quite as close of a match?
That's very well said. That's like the power of the Zacian and Kyogre team. You're always the faster Pokemon, and you're always able to dish out so much damage. And actually, like with the removal of a Dynamax, like with the Yawn from the Umbreon and the Landorus switching out mid Dynamax, Pablo was still able to gain so much momentum, being the faster Mon, and like sort of incidentally time the grassy terrain right and always be able to dish out so much damage, especially from that Kyogre whom we know so well that always dishes out damage, right? It's like helps chip all the mons down so that they are in KO range of another move. And very interesting to see like the game actually go all the way to the end.
Yeah, so many factors at play here, and both sides trying to get like a better edge and be able to win. Every single turn of that grassy terrain recovery mattered so much for the Dialga to be able to get that final survival. But yeah, so much positioning. You have the faster Pokemon. There was one turn where Pablo positioned Zacian and Kyogre out to just do so much damage as grassy terrain ended, and so there wasn't anything that Juan could do, and that totally flipped the match from like a dominating performance from one side to just about even. And I think that's something to watch for in the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And from Juan's side, I would like to like commend him for playing the first few turns out well, and then making sure he has the right time to Dynamax the Dialga. And here we see the new leads coming in game 2.
Yeah, so Zacian and Landorus out. Lots of pressure from one side versus the Talonflame coming out and the Dialga. So maybe Juan realizing that, the other side going first so often was a problem. I'm going to bring something that can set Tailwind and just like be able to do a lot of damage with my Dialga.
Yeah, and he actually catches Pablo on the in terms of the leads, because in the previous game, Pablo kind of prepared for a Talonflame. He brought Incineroar to be able to fake out Talonflame, and here Talonflame is actually free to go for the Tailwind, and Dialga is free to go for the Max Quake into the Zacian slot because I guess Max Quake could be safe because there isn't good switch-ins to I think the tornadoes from Pablo's side might not come, and Juan, if you're a game up, you might be daring enough to make that play.
Yeah, so we're going to see Landorus going to Dynamax. Looks like nothing has switched out, so if that Dialga goes for a Max Quake, it'll go into the Zacian. If it does something else, then we'll react accordingly. And looks like Dialga going to max as well, so turn 1 Dynamax from both sides. Just going to go for as much damage as they can right off the bat. Very excited to see how this plays.
Without the Umbreon on Juan's side, I think Pablo, with that White Herb Landorus, right, is more confident to go for a Dynamax here, because if the Dialga goes for a Max Wormwind into the Landorus slot, then it offsets the White Herb. So Protect coming out from the Zacian, which makes sense, the Tailwind coming out from the Talonflame, and here we get to see the move of choice, and that's actually Max Dragon, Max Wormwind going into the Landorus. Wow, that's so much damage.
So much. The White Herb going to be able to activate and protect the Landorus, but now that Zacian is down to just neutral attack, no longer has the +1, and that's a really big adjustment for one that like you don't have to worry quite so much about that Zacian. Airstream going to come out though. That's going to take the Talonflame down to a Focus Sash, but it's going to give the Zacian a speed boost. And now I'm not sure which one's going to be faster between Dialga and Zacian.
Yeah, that will be down to the players to do their mental calcs. But I kind of feel that the Zacian's gonna move first, and there could be a double target into the Dialga slot. So we'll just have to wait and see how fast this Dialga is trained. Yeah, so maybe with Tailwind it might not be the best idea, and I thought like that was a good idea from Pablo, going for a Max Airstream instead of the very obvious Max Quake into the Dialga.
Yeah, I think I said that both sides were going for offense with their Dynamax, but it seems like Pablo's also trying to use that Airstream as speed control and setting things up a little bit better. But we're going to see Zacian come out, maybe afraid of what the Talonflame could do. Incineroar's coming in, and we'll have to see how this turn plays out, if Juan can use the Tailwind pressure well enough.
I feel like for Juan, going for the Max Quake into the Zacian slot makes sense because the Zacian protected last turn, like kind of trusting that your Mons, like the Dialga, would survive the double up coming out from Zacian and Landorus, and sure enough, we see the Max Quake here with that Life Orb very comfortably taking out the Incineroar, also revealing that this Incineroar does not have the Shuka Berry. Yeah, and I'm not very sure what the Talonflame did into the Landorus, but it does make sense. If you're at your Focus Sash, maybe just go for that Flare Blitz just to do a little bit of damage, right?
Yeah, we saw one sort of checking the speed stats the last turn to sort of see who could go first, and it looks like confident that Talonflame is going before Landorus. Maybe it can pick up that Landorus with a Flare Blitz, or maybe it can burn it with a Will-O-Wisp. But that Max Quake KO is such a huge deal for this match. There's one less Pokemon on Pablo's side to worry about.
And I think that, like, back to turn 1, that strategy of going for the Max Wyrmwind, it actually paid off, because that forced Pablo to switch out the Zacian, right? If the Zacian's back to neutral, it might not be doing as much damage as he wished he wanted to. So that makes us a lot of sense. And over here, wow, the Talonflame is actually going for Will-O-Wisp, proving to be faster than even a +1 Landorus, and here the Dialga actually moves next again and going for the Max Wyrmwind to take out the Landorus.
Yeah, so a pretty big turn there, the Dialga just finishing off the Landorus. Zacian maybe trying to bait an attack by staying out, maybe hoping that you'd go for a Max Quake into it. But Juan reading that, just going for a Will-O-Wisp, Zacian switches out into Kyogre, and Kyogre doesn't mind being burned. But a pretty big deal to lose your Landorus here, and still be staring down 4 Pokemon with just your 2 restricteds.
Yeah, from one side, very well executed in the terms of the Dynamax coming out from the Dialga, and really catches Pablo with the lead of Dialga and Talonflame, right? Going straight for the Tailwind, making full use of Dialga's Life Orb and 3 powerful max moves, and always forcing Pablo to kind of be on the defensive and switching out the Zacian in fear of the Max Quake. And now Dialga actually has, I believe, 1 quick boost, so should be able to survive Kyogre's moves very handily. And from Pablo's end, he lost his Dynamax in the Landorus, and it requires both Zacian and Kyogre to sort of hold down the fort, right, and try and do as much damage as possible against the 4 Pokemon that Juan still has.
Yeah, so Talonflame going to pivot out. We're going to see another Pokemon that Juan has. It is that Rillaboom, going to be able to put down a lot of pressure on the Kyogre and potentially fake out that Zacian. Dialga going to see what it can do in this last turn of Tailwind to try to get some momentum. Zacian protecting, trying to catch an attack from Dialga. We're going to see what the Kyogre does. If it protects, it does not. And there's going to be an Earth Power going into the Kyogre. Not too much damage, and this Kyogre is going to be able to respond with a Water Spout. Going to just do a small amount of damage to both the Dialga and the Rillaboom. So not a whole lot happening that turn, but crucially, the Tailwind wears out this turn, I believe. And so there might be a bit of a shift in momentum here into Pablo's side.
Yep, and like that's so interesting. The Talonflame actually not wanting to go down, right? Like just hard switching out into the Rillaboom, knowing that the Tailwind is gonna end. Very heads up from Juan there, and now pressuring the fake out into the Zacian that just protected, and it could be a very easy fake out and Earth Power into the Zacian slot.
Zacian, seeing that, tries to go for the double protect, isn't able to, so the fake out's going to go out. Ice Beam's going to come out into that Rillaboom from the Kyogre, lots of damage, but this Dialga is going to be able to do whatever it likes, and it looks like that's an Earth Power into the Zacian.
Whoa, but it's the same. Yeah, the same story as just now. Zacian proving to always be very bulky. I think train like a bit in HP and defense, right? That makes a lot. Like that helps a lot for Pablo, and Zacian is actually able to survive. Like the Life Orb Earth Power. That's quite a big deal.
Yeah, that's a huge survival now. I'm not even sure if a Grassy Glide will KO Zacian or not. It's sort of a question. And Zacian could still keep protecting and regaining hit points from Grassy Glide. There's so much now that could happen in this set. These last 2, it's only 2 Pokemon for Pablo, but when it's a Zacian and a Kyogre, there's definitely a way to win a set.
Last time people say like when there's a Rock Slide, there's a way, but now in this match, when there's a Zacian and a Kyogre, there's always a way. Like some people have been thinking, right, whether this could be the call for Worlds to just go for something as stable as Zacian and Kyogre. Just now I was like sort of reacting to the Ice Beam coming out from the Kyogre. I thought probably the Ice Beam into the Dialga would be sort of a last resort play to try and fish for the
freeze.
The freeze, yeah.
We're going to see Rillaboom go down without taking out either of the opposing Pokemon. Caught just that Protect from the Zacian, and the Ice Beam did finish it off. But now we do still have the Dialga, and that Talonflame could come back in to potentially set Tailwind. The Zacian could come in on one side to sort of set up a lot of pressure. One challenge here is if Talonflame comes in, it won't have Gale Wings. So we aren't totally sure how the Zacian's trained. It might be able to just directly take the KO on the Talonflame before Tailwind goes up.
Yep. And having a Zacian in the back would be Juan's like saving grace, because having full health, being able to just take moves very well and easily KO the two Mons who are in the raid on the opposing side, I think that makes more sense. And here Juan chooses to switch in the Zacian to just keep putting on pressure. Dialga seems to still be really healthy out of all these exchanges and keeps going for Earth Power. I think maybe not wanting to miss probably a Roar of Time. And also not wanting to have that one turn recharge, right? So unfortunately, yeah, Dialga actually goes down here to that Sacred Sword that ignores the defense boost.
Yeah, such a huge KO there, but Zacian correctly targeting, going to stop the Kyogre from attacking. And now it's just the Zacian versus the world. And Juan still has the Talonflame, still has a full health Zacian. Going to be an uphill battle for this Zacian on Pablo's side here.
Yeah, so overall, I feel like this match was very well managed by Juan, especially in the Game 2 scenario, going straight for that Talonflame combination with that Dialga that we don't really see very often, and it really worked out well. And like with those 3 turns of Dialga's max, it doesn't matter if the Dialga goes down to the Sacred Sword last turn. I feel like it really did its job throughout the game.
Absolutely. I think just such commanding play from Juan, setting up the Talonflame and the Dialga. And we're going to see this match get finished off now with the Flare Blitz from Talonflame. And a critical hit just for good measure.
So nice to see the Talonflame actually being the Pokemon that helps seal the win for Juan, because that Tailwind really helped a lot in the momentum of the game for Juan's side, and that brings Uruguay up 1 game, so it's 3-1 to Guatemala.
Yeah, Uruguay coming in very strong this week. Needs the win to help them set up for the next stage. Quite exciting to see that victory there. Something I wanted to mention, we talked about how good the Talonflame was. I think one measure of that is that the Pablo side, the Zacian only ever went for Protect or switching for the first 6 or 7 turns of the game. Just some commanding play by Juan to say, I see that the Zacian's scary, but I can always put pressure on it every single turn. And that ended up working out quite well for him.
Yeah, that makes sense. And probably not bringing the Tornadoes on Pablo's side would make yourself very prone to max quicks, right? And the Dialga was really just free to go for max Wormwinds. You know that the Zacian's not in the back because the Zacian's on the field. You don't have to switch in the Fairy type to a Dragon move. So the Wormwind was safe into the Landorus. The max quick was safe into the Zacian slot. Then the Wormwind again. So very well played, well executed, and I'm interested to see whether a Zacian Dialga team would rise in popularity, right? Because of what we saw today.
It was so cool to see all the steel types on the teams here. If Kyogre is going to be popular, if it's going to set the rain and protect us from fire, maybe we just want a whole lot of steel types. And definitely a cool restricted combo to get seen showcased here. Definitely both of those restricteds put in so much work for Juan. And so a thing to keep your eyes on.
Yeah. Someone in chat actually mentioned, probably speaking Spanish, that the Talonflame actually went for Overheat. So that's interesting to note. Yeah, thanks. And with that, yeah, so that's Overheat. So a very interesting set, and that kind of reveals a little bit of information from Uruguay's side. Yeah, so we'll be going for a break. There will be 3 more exciting matches coming ahead, so don't go away. So this was the Victory Road World Cup, sponsored by GG Tour, Elgato, and Metafi.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this day of World Cup matches for Victory Road. Once again, sponsored by Elgato, GG Tour, and Metafy. I'm very excited to bring you the second of 4 matches today. We're in for quite a treat. And I'm joined, once again, I am Hayden McTavish, and I am joined by the one, the only Lou Crummy.
Oh, thank you for that lovely introduction, Hayden. I was really enjoying watching you and Evan kick off today's broadcast as well. A really interesting game, and we certainly have some great matches coming up for the rest of today's broadcast as well. I'm looking forward to jumping into our next match between Bolivia and Jamaica.
Yeah, we were just discussing Bolivia and Jamaica. Both their tournament lives are on the line here. They lost the previous week, and they need to be one of the top 2 of 4 in their group to be able to advance. So this week matters so much for both sides, and it's still almost completely undecided so far. We have 1 win for Jamaica, in the lead a little bit, but it's really still any side could win this week.
Exactly, only 1 match played so far, and the match we will be showcasing for you today is that one you see at the top of your screen between Brian Pérez for Bolivia and Kevonne Boreland for Jamaica. So Jamaica being one of the relatively new teams here at the Victory Road World Cup as well. So I'm going to be interested to see what their kind of team style is going to develop as this tournament goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very exciting to see all these new countries jumping into the fray and trying to prove themselves. Really excited to see how this turns out today.
Yeah, and Kevonne is actually the manager for Team Jamaica as well, so going to be really representing their country coming into this match. But let's take a closer look at the showdown we're going to be showing you between these 2 players. And I think the one thing that's really interesting is these are still new players jumping out into VGC and trying to carve a name out for themselves. Brian, you can see, doesn't have any accolades yet, except for being able to represent Bolivia here, and has participated in Copa America as well as the 2021 World Cup. So definitely a player well known within Bolivia, and we want to see some accolades coming onto that roster in the next kind of months to come. For Kevonne, on the other side, though, we have got a top 32 finish at Salt Lake City Regional.
Yeah, so one very impressive accomplishment from Kevonne here, and then lots more to come, I'm sure, for both players. But in the meantime, there's a lot of difficulty here on how to get a read on what your opponent is bringing. We were taking a look at right now. Brian's bringing a Solgaleo, which is definitely an unconventional choice. And like the previous weeks, both players chose some very interesting choices. I think Brian had a Cradley, Kevonne had an Evelkel. And so lots of mind games going into what each side chooses to bring this particular week.
Yeah, I love that creative team building with the Cradilli on Brian's side. I mean, one thing that's interesting is that Solgaleo you mentioned. We often see Solgaleo paired up with a Shadow Rider Calyrex, and that's actually the second restricted Brian had with the Solgaleo last week, but has actually opted to drop it in favor of the Kyogre. And I think the Kyogre, Incineroar, and Rillaboom on both these teams is that very classic Firewater Grass core we see. They're both extremely offensive Pokemon and have some good strategy as well with things like U-Turn and Parting Shot to have switchability with Incineroar and the Rillaboom, but also having that Fake Out utility. What do you think about the supporting Pokemon on these team though, Hayden?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's an interesting matchup between each of the individual ones. The Solgaleo has a nice opportunity to resist everything that the Zacian has, but it can't do quite as much damage right off the bat, so we'll have to see how that works out. I think the really interesting interaction is the Indeedee and the Grimmsnarl. That there's this nice way for Kevonne to be able to reduce damage, but the Indeedee can block attacks from the Grimmsnarl like Thunderwave. And I guess we're going to jump straight into the game.
Yeah, straight into the game, and the electric types are in full force out on the battlefield. We have got the Solgaleo and the Regieleki on the left-hand side of your screen, opposing down against the Grimmsnarl and the Zapdos as well.
Yeah, so it looks like almost a neutral start to this. Grimmsnarl's got a lot it can do to reduce the damage, but neither side feeling super threatened by the other right off the bat. We're going to have to see, it's the battle of the electric types, which one can do a little bit more this round to sort of advance things. And then the Grimmsnarl, of course, being a little bit scared of that Solgaleo. Going to have to figure out if it's worth getting those screens up in return for potentially taking something like a Sunsteel Strike.
Exactly. We're going to see a Dynamax straight away here in turn 1. This is always a really interesting thing when you see straight out of a game going straight on the offensive with something like a powerful Dynamax Pokemon. And it is going to be that Zapdos. It's going to be able to apply a lot of pressure with something like a Max Airstream, trying to gain a little bit of momentum with speed control very early on in this game 1. And of course, it can apply some good pressure to something like the Regieleki that isn't the bulkiest of Pokemon. Grimmsnarl, however, is just going to go straight for a Reflect, setting up the defense on the opposing side of the field here, as Regieleki, nice and speedy, is able to connect down into the opposing Zapdos and reduce its special attack, I believe, by 2 stages there. The retaliation is indeed going to be that max airstream into the Regieleki. Does really not too much damage. Regieleki definitely investing in a little bit of bulk there, as the speed will boost up onto Kevonne's side of the field.
Yeah, it's such an interesting choice with the Eerie Impulse from Regieleki being able to reduce that damage there. And we're going to see the Solgaleo go for a Trick Room. So that max airstream didn't do much damage. The Zapdos is -2 special attack. It can't do very much. And it's now too fast for the pace of the game.
Yeah, that's the thing. The speed interactions are wild here at the beginning of this game. You know, you might think getting up the max airstream is great, gaining your speed control momentum, but Solgaleo just completely switching it and now reversing those speeds, meaning Solgaleo is going to be in a great position going forward.
I think such a surprising choice to see from Solgaleo. It's so fast that often it doesn't tend to go for it, although its partner Lunala sometimes does. And I think just a commanding shift of the game. This Zapdos has Dynamax and now doesn't really have much it can do on the field. And meanwhile, Solgaleo is free to fire off as many attacks as it likes. Granted, it has to work through the Reflect from the Grimmsnarl to do so.
That's true. The Reflect is going to put a little bit of difficulty on the offensive pressure of that Solgaleo, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it being the Dynamax Pokemon of choice here for Brian. Solgaleo, really well known for going into its Dynamax form. It's got a really reasonable chunk of bulk to it, and in Dynamax, obviously, it gets that double HP stat. It's just going to be even harder to take down, and it can just start going for things like max Steel Spikes and rolling up the defense boost on that side of the field, and that looks like exactly what the Solgaleo has gone for here. Targeting down into that Grimmsnarl, not enough to get the one-hit KO against it, but obviously does a significant chunk of damage as it is super effective against that Grimmsnarl, and you want to try and remove the disrupted Pokemon on the field before it can get up for any more disruption. Grimmsnarl is going to connect down into that opposing Solgaleo and activate the weakness policy as well. This is a key item on Solgaleo. Like we often see activated with self-activation by something like Bulldoze, but I believe that was the foul play and able just to boost up the offensive pressure of Solgaleo. And you can see how bulky it is. That max move did very little damage to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a huge turn of events here to see that even though there's not an obvious way to activate the weakness policy for Solgaleo, it still has it, and you can't safely foul play into it. And we're going to see the Grimmsnarl getting knocked out for its troubles. It gave Solgaleo a boost and then knocked out by that Thunderbolt from Regieleki. I think a lot of pressure coming out from the Solgaleo here. It's in Trick Room. It's got the boost. You can't lower its attack, unlike Zacian, because of that full metal body. Very commanding position from Brian.
Yeah, Brian in a great position here. Grimmsnarl actually really kind of helping out Brian there with that foul play and enabling it to get those boosts up. And Solgaleo now in a position where it can go for something like a Max Quake into that opposing Zacian. You know, Zacian's out in the field. If you're Kevonne here, you might want to go for something like a Protect and just try and stall out some of these moves. But even if you go for a Protect, the Max Quake is going to boost up the special defense on Brian's side of the field. And that's going to really frustrate the Zapdos on the opposing side.
Yeah, definitely a tough spot for Kevonne to figure out how to sort of shift the momentum back into his favor. I think also just a lot of information gained, though. Like now you know you can't go for a safe foul play. Solgaleo, you know it has Trick Room. And so lots of advantage from Brian, but you have to use a lot of surprises to get it. And so maybe that's sort of the advantage Kevonne is looking for is, how do I advance to the next game? How do I potentially still position myself into a better spot for this one?
Yep, that's true. Trick Room does have a limited amount of turns, so you have to start counting them. And if you're Kevonne, trying to find a way to work around them. Regieleki just going to go for Protect here, as Solgaleo does indeed go for that Max Quake, targeting down into the Zacian that we did not see Protect. It's going to take the full brunt of this, but thanks to the bulk and the reflex that is up on Kevonne's side of the field, it's going to be able to take that. Very much would have been a one-hit KO otherwise, thanks to the weakness policy boost on that Solgaleo. Zacian is able to retaliate, however, down, and the Zapdos is able to go for another Max Lightning into the Solgaleo, you know, boosted up by the sorry, not boosted up because it's not a grounded Pokemon. You know, Zapdos just trying hard, however, but thanks to having that Max Quake boost as well, it's just not going to be dealing as much damage at all. Unfortunately, my Spanish is not as good. I couldn't catch what the Zacian did. Were you able to catch it, Hayden?
It was hard to tell. I think we would have seen the Behemoth Blade animation if it were that, so it must have been something like a Sacred Sword. But yeah, definitely a huge factor that the Reflect means the Zacian survives. I was thinking that this was much more of a decided game, but with Reflect, there aren't a whole lot of KOs coming up from Brian's side yet, and so it's still possible to maybe come back. That said, as you brought up, the Max Quake boost on the Solgaleo, it being in Max, it's really hard to be able to take this thing down. It still has half of its hit points left.
Yeah, that's very true. Zacian, however, looking to be in a really precarious situation. Anything really powerful coming out from this Regieleki that will get the boost from the electric terrain is going to be able to pick up a KO against it. And Zapdos doesn't necessarily want to take, you know, electric moves either, particularly if Regieleki's getting the boost, but we are going to see a switch. And speaking of that electric terrain, it is now gone in favor of the grassy terrain that the Rillaboom brings to the field with its grassy surge abilities. So Kevonne at least has the utility to go for something like a fake out into the next turn and stall out these Trick Room turns a little bit more. It is going to have a max Rockfall coming down into that opposing Zapdos that is not going to be able to survive that, particularly from the boosted Solgaleo. I mean, Solgaleo has just such a plethora of varied moves here, so flexible, going for ground, rock, and steel type moves as well. It's kind of got an answer for everything on Kevonne's side of the field.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like it has the perfect move for every situation. That Rillaboom did switch in well. Going to just take the Thunderbolt and not a whole lot of damage there. But it's going to be tough to figure out how to come back with just these last two Pokemon for Kevonne.
Yeah, I completely agree. Kevonne really pinned down now. You only have the utility to be able to go for your Zacian and the Rillaboom here. And Zacian, we know, is living on very precarious HP at the moment. A little bit of recovery as well on the field, thanks to that grassy terrain. You have to counteract the Sandstorm as well to the Pokemon that are affected by it. So we're going to see a lot of chip animations over these next couple of turns as the Zacian returns to the field.
I think one thing to note, though, I think that is the end of the Solgaleo's Dynamax, and there should just be one turn left of Trick Room. So maybe some possibility for Kevonne to sort of try to get out of that situation and then do a lot of damage. But as you mentioned, the Zacian so low on hit points is going to be quite a tall order for Kevonne here.
Very true, and Brian also has utility to access all four Pokemon that he's brought to the match here. Solgaleo looking to be, in a little bit more of a precarious situation. It's gone below 50 HP, but we know how bulky it is, particularly from the Max Steel Spike. It's been able to get that +1 defense in front of these two physical attackers. Regieleki, still looking very happy to be here, but if you were Brian, I suppose I wouldn't worry too much about losing a Pokemon at this stage, because it gives you a free switch to bring in something like the Incineroar maybe hiding in the back to throw down and intimidate, and that's what we're going to see Brian bringing in.
Yeah, absolutely. Incineroar coming in. Lots of options for Brian to sort of just try to figure out the position game, not the having more Pokemon game, now that he has the resources to do so. So going to come in, and we're just seeing sort of defensive play from Kevonne's side for this last turn of Trick Room.
Yeah, very defensive play, going to be the double protect, very classic when you go into that last turn of Trick Room. Just do not want your opponent to gain any momentum. But I love that play there from Brian, realizing that Kevonne is probably going to go for that double protect. How about I switch in my Incineroar, not only throw down and intimidate, but now have the utility to go for fake out on this next turn as well.
Yeah, some really brilliant play with speed here from Brian, especially that you've got Trick Room up to sort of threaten the Zacian from the slower Pokemon on the field, and then the moment the Trick Room goes out, you've got Regieleki in position to outspeed it. You've got Incineroar ready to fake out so the Rillaboom can't go for Grassy Glide. Just some wonderful positional play there.
Yeah, I fully agree. Brian has really played this well with the speed tiers. And, Regieleki managed to survive a whole round of Trick Room. Not something we see every day, but it's here, able to be outside of Trick Room and applying pressure, just like you said. Now it's back in its environment that it loves to be in. The double protect fails on the opposing Rillaboom, so it will have to take this fake out from the Incineroar, leaving the Zacian exposed to the Regieleki that is just going to go straight down for that Thunderbolt and pick up the KO against it.
Yeah, so that looks like it's spelling the end for Kevonne here for this first game. So I think lots of questions about sort of, you've seen this positional play, you've seen that there's a Trick Room mode from the Solgaleo. What do you do to adjust? A big open question for Kevonne to be thinking about now.
Yeah, I'd be wondering what the move pool potentially is on that Grimmsnarl. I mean, we saw the Reflect. We can assume there's going to be something like a Light Screen. We saw the Foul Play, but we haven't seen the fourth move, unless I completely missed that. And it could be running something like a Taunt just to try and shut down against the Solgaleo. We know it's running Weakness Policy, so you don't have to worry about a Rogue Mental Herb on there. But other than that, I'm not sure what other utility there is to stop Trick Room, other than a Fake Out.
Yeah, definitely a tough situation to figure out how to use Grimmsnarl well, especially because the main thing it can do, doing damage to Solgaleo, is now something you have to be really careful about, because you might just get activate that Weakness Policy and then have it all set up in Trick Room.
Yeah, the Trick Room play was really lovely coming out from Brian. It just determined the whole course of the match and really put Brian in the driving seat to control not only the speed tiers, but also the offensive pressure that was going through. There was really nothing that Kevonne could do to stop that Solgaleo in its tracks. It was just able to keep getting boosts, keep applying pressure, and then ultimately getting those KOs as well. So if you're Kevonne, you really have to be thinking, how am I going to stop the Solgaleo?
Absolutely. And I think that Trick Room play is it's one of those plays where it's not just a surprise in the first game when you're not prepared for it, but now it totally flips your perception of the whole team on its head. That maybe this Kyogre is really slow and you can set up Trick Room and then sweep with the Kyogre. There's so many factors that you now have to consider that you might not think about on Team Preview, and just a tall order for Kevonne to sort of try to figure out the right angle into this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if we dive into game 2, we'll be able to have a little look at how Kevonne is able to adjust and work around that Solgaleo and, of course, the pesky Trick Room mode that we saw utilized so well by our Bolivian player, Brian, on the side of the field. It is going to be a little bit of an adjustment. We've got the Incineroar and the Grimmsnarl coming out instead of the Zapdos for Kevonne, but it's going to be the Solgaleo and the Rillaboom for Brian.
Yeah, so some interesting adjustments. I'm curious to see what the Incineroar does. We didn't see that last time. Usually great at sort of controlling Dynamax pressure from the opposing side, but maybe a bit tough here because we do know that Solgaleo has weakness policies. So all of these nice attacks from the Grimmsnarl and the Incineroar, they have to be careful when they use them because that Solgaleo could get really strong quite quickly.
Yeah, that's true. I guess at least the Incineroar here is in a position to go for something like the Fake Out. But you're right, you have to play around the weakness policy on the Solgaleo. And particularly if Brian has something like the Incineroar in the back, Brian could always switch in his own Incineroar, apply an Intimidate to something like a Flare Blitz or a Darkest Lariat. Won't do much damage to the Solgaleo, but will still inevitably activate that weakness policy. But we are going to see a switch. It's going to be the Kyogre instead.
Yeah, another way to stop that Flare Blitz from doing damage, just set up the Rain, and now Solgaleo may be in a bit of a safer position. Reflect going to go up, but this Solgaleo happy to do whatever it can this turn, presumably.
Yeah, well, it looks like we see the Burning Jealousy actually come out from the opposing Incineroar, maybe thinking that there was going to be that Intimidate. Instead, it was the Rain that Brian bought, which again cleverly just protects up that Solgaleo. And Kevonne has done the one thing you don't want to do facing down against Solgaleo, activating the weakness policy and enabling it to go for that Trick Room once again.
That's an interesting interaction I actually wasn't aware of there, that if you Burning Jealousy and give someone a boost via weakness policy, that doesn't give you the burn. So maybe that's something that Kevonne wasn't clear on. And if that had worked the way that it could have, that like the weakness policy gives the boost and so Burning Jealousy burns you, that would have been a brilliant play. The Solgaleo would have been at +2, outplay would have still done a lot of damage, but the boost from the attacking damage wouldn't have been there.
Yeah, that's really true, actually. The interactions of Burning Jealousy always conflicted with kind of which boosts you get and when you get them as well. I know there's a lot of interactions with Zacian coming into the field as well with Burning Jealousy that always trip players up as well. But it's interesting to see that come out onto the Incineroar as well. When it comes to Fire-type moves, we do see a lot of flexibility. It's often the Flare Blitz, though, on Incineroar.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely an unconventional choice here. We are going to see a Dynamax come out, presumably that Solgaleo at the nice level of boost. Probably necessary, honestly, because the Grimmsnarl could have gone for a foul play on this boosted Solgaleo with Trick Room up. So sort of needing to acknowledge the tools that Kevonne has and set up this Dynamax.
All right, but Brian, once again, looking very comfortable with the Solgaleo. You can see the foul play does so much more damage, though, once it's got those boosts. And the Incineroar is also going to add a little bit of insult to injury into that Kyogre that's been sitting there kind of nice and quiet on the field next to the big Solgaleo. And it's just going to reduce its special attack by a stage as well. It also reduces its attack, but Kyogre's not going to worry about that. And it also enables the Incineroar to get off the field before any water-type moves come its way. What do you think Kevonne's going to switch into?
It's a tall order for anything Kevonne sends in. It might have to take a Water Spout. It might have to take any number of other attacks. And then it's also whatever you bring in is going to need to bring enough pressure on the Solgaleo. And I'm not sure there's a single Pokemon that can do that from Kevonne's side. I think Rillaboom takes the attack well from Water Spout. Zacian's going to come in, though, it looks like.
Yeah, Zacian here on the field once again to face down against that Solgaleo. It's going to have to avoid any potential max Quakes, but Solgaleo just going once again for that max Steel Stripe into the opposing Grimmsnarl. It is able to pick up the one-hit KO this time. Was that a critical hit through the Reflect? It was indeed. So able to remove Grimmsnarl from the field nice and early in this game too, and of course get the defense boost up as well in front of this opposing Zacian. So really nice play there from Brian with a little bit of luck as well to get rid of a Pokemon on Kevonne's side.
Absolutely, and this Water Spout is going to come out single target now, sort of offsetting the jump, but it's still enough. It survives. That's amazing.
Yeah, Zacian just hanging on in there, getting a little bit of grassy terrain recovery as well. But in the Trick Room environment, you know, that's something Zacian doesn't want to be in. It's known for being fast and offensive, and I think Kevonne's going to have to play very defensively around it, even at a Pokemon disadvantage now in order to preserve it, to keep it doing its offensive damage later in the match. It's going to be another Kyogre coming in, though.
Yeah, the Kyogre, an interesting adjustment. I'm not sure how it matches up with speed with the Solgaleo, but if it is sufficiently slow, then you've got the option to just sort of go for a Water Spout and maybe clean up some of the other side of the field, maybe use Trick Room in your own favor. Otherwise, though, it's going to be really tough to figure out how to, as you said, the Zacian's low HP, the Kyogre's around and can do damage, but it might be too fast to be able to use the Trick Room.
Yeah, that's true. I even wonder with the low HP on the Zacian, even if it goes for Protect, if something like a Max Quake is going to be able to KO it through that protective measure. But we're going to see the Dynamax coming out on Kevonne's side. Obviously, we know it can't be the Zacian, it can't Dynamax, so it's going to be a big Kyogre out here on the battlefield and wanting to utilize the rain to do some really big Max Geysers.
Yeah, a really good adjustment here. It's going to be hard to do a lot of damage to the Kyogre, and it could have quite a bit of damage onto the other side. We'll have to see what it chooses to go for.
Well, Zacian is indeed going to go for the Protect. Maybe the Reflect will help it out with those last crucial hit points to survive something like the Max Quake, which is what the Solgaleo is going for. It's targeting down into that opposing Zacian. Is it able to hang on? No, looks like it has been KO'd to the Max Quake. And of course, Brian's two Pokemon are going to be able to get the boost from that as well.
Yeah, so a really nice special defense boost for taking whatever it is this Kyogre has to dish out. And down to just 2 Pokemon for Kevonne. That's a really commanding lead from Brian.
Yeah, and the Kyogre on Brian's side, I think, going for another Water Spout there with a critical hit into the opposing Kyogre. Doesn't do too much damage at all, as the Max Geyser is the retaliation from the Kyogre on Kevonne's side into that opposing Solgaleo. Thanks to the special defense boost of the Max Quake as well, it is going to be able to survive, get a little bit more grassy terrain damage. And things just, it looks like it is so hard to get rid of the Solgaleo.
Absolutely. The Solgaleo has been so impressive this whole set. It's at every turn it's had like just the perfect max move. It's always set up Trick Room turn 1, gotten a weakness policy boost, and really been able to put a lot of pressure. And we're almost running out of tools for Kevonne at this point to be able to take out the Solgaleo. Yeah,
that's very true. I mean, Solgaleo is that very limited HP, but the issue you have then is if you invest too much time and energy and focus from your Pokemon into taking down the Solgaleo, the partner Pokemon are going to be able to chip away at you and remove the other Pokemon from play. And Brian still has all 4 remaining Pokemon here, so yes, you might be able to get rid of 1 Titan on the battlefield, but you've still got 3 Pokemon to contend with, and that's certainly an issue for Kevonne at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point to bring up, that especially when you get to have 2 restricteds, not just 1, being able to have so much pressure and attention on Solgaleo while it's setting up speed control for its whole team is so beneficial. And we were sort of curious about the choice of Kyogre with Solgaleo, but here it's been working so well that the Kyogre is now just sending off Water Spouts twice in a row at full health and doing a lot of damage to the other side of the field.
Well, Solgaleo actually switching to play a little defensively, using its last max turn to go for a max guard. And it looks like I think it was something was coming out there going into it. I wasn't sure. I'm afraid my Spanish is not so good at this point. But it was able to defend itself. One Pokemon that can't defend itself, however, is that Incineroar. It is going to be KO'd. And we actually see the Solgaleo taking no damage, of course, from the Max, I believe it was a Max Geyser coming out from the Kyogre. So Kevonne really deciding to try and target down into that Solgaleo. And the Max Guard, just a perfect play by Brian.
Yeah, exactly what you brought up, that if you focus too much on the Solgaleo, then you're not paying attention to the other side, and there's too much pressure to handle if you have a Kyogre and a Solgaleo next to each other. And it looks like it's now sort of a 4-1 situation and pretty close to the end of the set here.
Yeah, very true. And I can't remember if we've had a sneak peek into the Pokemon that Brian has in the back, but particularly if it's something like the Rillaboom, there's not a lot the Kyogre can do. And it looks like we see Kevonne hit that forfeit button, meaning that Brian will be taking this game 2-0 for Bolivia.
Yeah, awesome for Bolivia to get that edge up. I think that balances out the score to 1-1, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And such an interesting set to be able to watch. I'd never considered whether Solgaleo plus Kyogre could be a good combination, and clearly it is. That was really cool to be able to see.
Yeah, it was nice seeing the flexibility of Solgaleo away from its partner that we often see it with, of that Calyrex Shadow Rider. Again, it's nice to have the physical restricted paired up with like a special attacker as well. It gives yourself as a player like a lot of flexibility and options of how you want to approach a game. But it really stood on its own little 4 legs and was able to go for that Trick Room and apply so much pressure. It just was really difficult for Kevonne to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I did think the way that Kevonne tried to handle it in the second set was really interesting. Like if the Burning Jealousy mechanics were a little different, that would have been a really good position there. Even just sort of making sure that if the Solgaleo goes for Trick Room, you've set up the weakness policy boost so that you can go for that foul play. And it just, that Solgaleo had so much bulk that even with all of that planning, it was really hard to be able to take it out.
Yeah, foul play was very destructive in that game too, but I think that definitely made the Solgaleo a little angry, retaliating with that critical hit just to remove Grimmsnarl from the field. But a fantastic second game in our broadcast, but this is only the halfway point of today's broadcast. We've got 2 more fantastic games coming up for you, so we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere, Pokemon trainers. Watch.